What's up, everybody? I'm Steven from the Hills Maniacs, and today I will be continuing my review of the entire Rocky franchise. Today, in this video, I'm going to be talking about the third installment in the Rocky franchise, Rocky 3. So when you look back at my review of the first two Rocky movies, I talked about the theme of those two movies in those videos. You know, there was like an overall theme between the two movies of, you know, fighting for what you believe in or fighting for your dreams and doing anything you can to achieve them. And even if you fail you fail at first or you don't achieve them right away, you know, you keep picking yourself back up and continue to fight for them until you achieve them. And that's what we saw in the first two Rocky movies, where Rocky does that. He loses the first time around, but then he wins the championship in the second movie. And in the third movie, I don't really feel like there was necessarily like a lesson in it. I mean, other than maybe it could be argued that the lesson was like fighting for those that you care about or those you love. Because in this one, we see, you know, Rocky, at one point in this movie, he's all down on himself and he feels like he's lost focus on being a fighter because he's focused on everyone else. He's focused on Adrian and their son. He's focused on just everybody else in his life and all the fame that he has now, and he hasn't focused enough on being a fighter, and that's kind of taken his focus off of it. And I don't really know necessarily where the lesson comes in all that. I guess maybe like fighting for your family isn't a bad thing necessarily. That was just kind of one of the things I didn't like about this movie. There wasn't like a direct message that you could get out of it. And that's why I liked those first two movies so much, because it had that sort of grounded, human-based moral lesson that we could all follow along with and use that lesson in our everyday life. But this one didn't really have that. That was just like a little nitpicky thing that I didn't like about this movie. But there were some other things that I just didn't really like about this at all. For one thing, in this movie, we see Rocky has been the champion for 3 years now since the events of the second movie. And he's been living in a life of luxury. You know, he's getting that fame and fortune from being a champion and getting all the big paychecks and that sort of thing. And he's living in like a new house and all that kind of stuff. And I feel like that almost goes against his character of like who we learned that he was in the first two movies. Because he was originally this like humble person who didn't really care much for living a life of luxury. He was living in an apartment in Philadelphia and stuff. He just enjoyed being a fighter, and he wasn't really doing it for the money and that sort of thing. And yeah, I mean, you could argue like he needs that money because he has a family to take care of now. But it just felt to me like that kind of went against his character. Like he should still be living sort of on the streets of Philadelphia. Not the streets, I guess, but like just like an apartment or something in Philadelphia. These lower level things that aren't like this big mansion or whatever. You know, I feel like him using that money for that reason kind of went against who he was as a person, I guess, and who we learned that he was in those first two movies. And then also this movie, I just felt like it was too short. I mean, the first two movies were about 2 hours long, and this one was only like an hour 40 minutes, I believe it was, in total. And I feel like that was too short because it got to the end of the movie too quickly. Because there's a whole montage of Rocky getting back into the fight. He's training for his rematch with the villain of this movie, Clubber Lang, who actually beat him for the championship early on in the movie. And then we see after some character building and stuff for Rocky where he's like depressed and just doesn't want to fight anymore, and he's scared of Clubber because Clubber gave him a beatdown in their first encounter. Once he gets to that point where he's basically persuaded to compete again and go back after Clubber to get the title back, the movie just kind of almost ends at that point. Like I think it spends about 15 minutes on him training to get back to that fight. And then the fight happens for another 15 minutes, and Rocky just wins, and that's the end of it. You know, it kind of just ends with him winning the title, pretty much. And I feel like when you compare that to the first two movies, where it did this really amazing build-up to Rocky facing off against Apollo Creed, and then even the second movie, him training to fight him again and stuff, those montages there where it showed both of them like training to fight each other and that sort of thing, I thought were really well done. But in this movie, it just went by too quickly. I feel like I don't know if they cut a lot of stuff out of the movie or if it was always intended to be only an hour and 40 minutes. But it just felt kind of rushed, in my opinion, when you really look at it compared to the other two movies. But now we'll get into the things that I did like about this movie. I did like that Clubber Lang was the one going after Rocky this time around. Like in their first two movies, Rocky's the one, he went after Apollo Creed and the World Championship and stuff. And now that Rocky is the one that has that title, and he's been defending it for 3 years, I guess. I think they said he had like 10 title defenses by the time this movie actually kicks off. I like that someone else is now chasing him because he's the champion. And it's this really threatening fighter that's like undefeated, just like Apollo Creed was, really. It's almost like another Apollo Creed, but this time Rocky is the target instead of Rocky targeting them to go for the championship, which is how it would be in real life. Like, I guess eventually once a boxer is undefeated or whatever, they would go for the world title. But I like that he's the one antagonizing Rocky the whole time. Like, he even said something about Adrian and that sort of thing, and that ticked Rocky off to the point where he was willing to fight Clubber the first time. Whereas before that, he kept avoiding Clubber throughout the whole movie and stuff, and like hearing whispers about him and that sort of thing, and Clubber even challenging him on TV to a fight, and Rocky kind of just turning that down and stuff. Or at least Rocky's manager, Mickey, may have turned it down for him or whatever, but he kept trying to convince him not to fight Clubber. So I kind of like that dynamic where it's kind of a reverse of roles in a way, where now the villain of the movie is chasing the hero instead of what you see in these normal kind of hero-villain movies where the hero is always going after the villain for something they did. Now he's chasing Rocky, and we get to see that perspective of it, where we see Rocky is reluctant to fight him, just as Apollo Creed was reluctant to fight Rocky in the first movies. And that kind of ties in also with another thing I like. There was this couple moments there where Rocky finds out that Mickey, his manager, was actually hand-picking his opponents that he had during those 10 title defenses, and he picked people that were slightly easier to beat so that Rocky would continue to retain the championship and think that he's a winner. And Rocky even mentions this later on. He's like, oh, this time I thought I was a winner, and then I found out that I'm not a winner because everything was fixed for me and that sort of thing. And I kind of like that aspect of the story as well, where he starts to question Mickey and why Mickey's doing that. And we find out that Mickey was doing it just to protect Rocky because he didn't want to see Rocky get another beating like he got when he fought Apollo Creed. And that's why Mickey also tries to protect Rocky from Clubber Lang in this movie, because he knows that he's a dangerous man and he's been going to his fights to see him. So you kind of get that hero and mentor sort of argument in this movie where like they clash with each other because he doesn't want to see Rocky get hurt and Rocky doesn't agree with that, basically. That he wants him to let him free almost in a way. That's another reason that leads to Rocky fighting Clubber in this movie in the first place. It's to prove himself and to prove to everyone that he is as good as he says he is. But then of course he loses really bad to Clubber, and that kind of throws everything off for Rocky. And of course Mickey ends up passing away in this movie as well, I think from like a heart attack or whatever. And that kind of just causes a downward spiral for Rocky for a little bit, where he feels like he doesn't want to fight anymore because he doesn't want to lose everything that he loves in this world. He doesn't want to lose Adrian and everyone he cares about, or even his own life for that matter. So I kind of like that they threw that in there. It's sort of a more down-to-earth way of looking at these characters. They're not just characters in a movie. This is something that, like, this is how people would react in real life. Like him being mad at Mickey for trying to protect him, and Mickey not understanding why Rocky would be mad about that. Like, I kept the title on you all this time because of this, and your fame is because you've been winning all these matches and that sort of thing. And to see Rocky questioning himself, is he as good as he says, especially after he loses to Clubber, it kind of felt more down to earth. I do also like that Apollo Creed is actually back in this movie again. Like, I didn't expect that. I hadn't really ever seen trailers or nothing for any of these movies really, so I wasn't expecting Apollo Creed to actually be in this movie. So I was surprised when he showed up, and he actually helps Rocky in this movie. He gives him advice. He even takes on the role of being his manager when Mickey passes away, and helps him get back on his feet again. And he's the one that convinces him, like, where's the Rocky that fought me and beat me? You know, and he understands what Rocky's going through. But I kind of like that because I didn't expect it. The villain from the first two movies has enough respect for the person that beat him that he now helps him to win the fight against Clubber at the end. And his different style of fighting compared to what Mickey taught Rocky, made it harder for Rocky at first to sort of digest that, but learning these different ways to fight from Apollo Creed compared to what he learned to Mickey, and taking all that knowledge together is what led to his victory. And I like that they used Apollo Creed to do all that, and they made him Rocky's new friend basically. And the fact that Apollo was willing to do that, I thought was pretty cool, and kind of gives us a different look at his character, because we know in the first two movies and stuff, he was all about himself. He was the world champion, he was undefeated, he didn't really care about anybody else, and that's kind of similar to Clubber Lang in this movie. He's all about himself. He says he's staying in the locker room by himself, doesn't really train with his trainers and stuff, he just trains on his own. It's kind of similar to what Apollo Creed did. He was all full of himself, thought he couldn't be beaten, and then Rocky Balboa comes along and embarrasses him. And then to see that character transformation for him, becoming a friend of Rocky's and actually helping Rocky, I thought was really well done, and it kind of surprised me in a good way. So all in all, I'd say I didn't really like this movie as much as the first two. I mean, it's still okay. It's not like a super bad movie. Like I said, it was just a little too short for me. I feel like if they'd have added another maybe 20 minutes to it, made it the same runtime as the other two movies, maybe it would have been a little bit better. But let me know your guys' thoughts down in the comments section. Did you enjoy Rocky 3? What were your thoughts on the first two Rocky movies? Let me know all that down in the comments section. Also, be sure to check out my reviews of the first two Rocky movies if you haven't seen them already. I do plan on reviewing all of the Rocky movies, and I might even do the 3 Creed movies as well. So keep an eye out for that if you're a fan of the Rocky franchise. Thank you for watching this video, everyone, and I'll see you in the next one.